Hi, I'm Lindsay O'Donnell with Threatpost, and I'm here today at Black Hat USA with Matt Olney of Cisco Talos. Matt, how's it going?
It's going great. Having a good show. Glad to see you.
Good. Yeah, you too. So can you give us kind of a quick intro to yourself and your role at Cisco?
Sure. My name is Matt Olney. I'm the Director of Threat Intelligence at Cisco Talos. So I maintain all of our threat relationships and do some of our longer-term strategic research to make sure we're tracking actors correctly.
Great. Well, glad to have you here at the show.
Glad to be here.
So I wanted to talk a bit about election security.
Okay.
Obviously, that's a huge topic in the security space right now. And I actually haven't seen too much discussion around that at Black Hat. I don't know about you, but...
No, I haven't. I anticipate seeing a lot more at the Voting Village at DEF CON on this Friday, Saturday. And but no, I haven't seen anything specific about it in Black Hat proper.
Right, yeah. Well, it's definitely still a big topic. So, taking a step back, can you kind of go through the biggest threats that we're facing right now when it comes to election security?
Well, I think the biggest threats are pretty well documented in terms of foreign adversaries. Maybe not trying to necessarily change vote tallies or change votes, but certainly are in and amongst the systems that support the election systems in the United States and in other countries, and obtaining from them information that they can use in information operations or to further their work in the future in election systems. So right now I think the most systemic threat is definitely foreign interference.
Right. No, yeah, that I feel like that is like top of mind for a lot of people, especially with like social media campaigns and what we're seeing there, and Facebook and Twitter. It seems like that has really been a top priority for them over the past year.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people think of election security and they think voting machines and vote counting machines, and really the action that we're seeing in the election security space is actually directly tied to the action that we're seeing in the information operations space in Twitter and Facebook and other places like you mentioned. And this is one of those problems where, while you see it easily in those two spaces, it really affects everybody. So every election official, every politician, every campaign manager, but also every participant in Western democracy has a role to play in terms of making sure that they're putting forward accurate information and not enabling the foreign adversaries to interfere.
Right. When I think of the last election, I feel like the concept of misinformation really took people by surprise for kind of how that had influence. I guess that's up for discussion, but I feel like for this upcoming election in the coming years, we're now seeing even more threats having to do with that, like deep fakes and like all these other new things. Do you think that we'll be prepared for that in the future?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Past experience.
I wish, yeah.
Certainly we're aware of it, which helps.
Yeah.
Right? So awareness helps. But it also, I think there's some fundamental ways that human beings think that are being used against us.
Right.
And it takes an active, engaged, thoughtful process to work with this information and some honesty from a whole bunch of different parties about what is and isn't fake news. And I think that term can be misused politically sometimes. But also... fake news then we sometimes pass that on because it plays to our narrative that we like about the left or the right or whatever that we're thinking about, and we don't give that the rigor we would give information that we don't like.
Yeah, no, I went to a really interesting talk. I think it was at InfoSecurity Europe a couple months ago, and someone was talking about how with IoT devices that now brings kind of a new narrative to how political campaigns can be can influence different people, because it's essentially collecting your data right from your home. That's like a very real danger for the future too. I don't know if that's something you're seeing.
Certainly needs something to be aware of, right?
Right.
So any place where you have a source of information that you can then use to profile people and then try to figure out where the wedge point is for you to separate them and
Right.
build divisions between people, because that's ultimately what our adversary is trying to do, is to tear at the social fabric of the Western democracies. And so when you see, for example, in a slightly different example, when you see action on voter registration databases, the information in those databases could be used by the adversary to profile people and say, all right, this is Democrats, these are Republicans, we're gonna send them this kind of information, and building profiles. So when the governor of Florida stands up and says, we've been told that voter registration databases have been compromised in Florida, but it's okay, well, he didn't say it was okay, but we want want to emphasize that there were no votes changed. That's not a victory, and that's not a safe thing. The adversary still got a substantial amount of information potentially from those.
No, for sure. So switching gears, now I wanted to talk a little bit about the voting machines themselves and kind of those systems. What threats are we facing in that arena, or is that still kind of up for debate at this point? What are we seeing?
Well, the baseline thing to understand is that any human design machine is going to have vulnerabilities. And what we've done over the past 20-some years is try to make it more and more difficult to weaponize those vulnerabilities and try to build processes to reduce the number of those vulnerabilities. So when you hear a voting machine can be compromised, that's not an indictment of the voting machine vendor necessarily. It's more that should be more defined by how that voting machine vendor responds. And when they respond responsibly and acknowledge the bug, work to fix it, publish the patch, that's just part of development. And so I don't necessarily like the sensationalization, even though it is rightfully critical to our daily lives. It needs to be approached with understanding that they're just computers. They're designed by people, and you need to treat them that way.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that we're facing at this point when it comes to election security?
I think probably the biggest challenge that people aren't aware of is really the varying funding year to year for states to secure their networks. So the Help America Vote Act provided a large mechanism for providing funds to the states to secure their systems, but it's not provided every year. So a year or so ago, the Trump administration allocated $300-some million through that vehicle. But those were the first funds that were provided since, I believe, 2010. And so that's a very hard economy for voting machine vendors to work in when your constituents or your clients are only getting funding every 8-9 years.
Right.
It's hard to reinvest and get a steady stream of investment to secure and improve your machines. So I think that's kind of like that paired with the political realities of the United States, where there is no federal control over elections or no centralized control, which not something I would necessarily advocate for, but it would make a systemic approach easier. And so instead, we have to recognize that that's not what we have here, that we have, hundreds of thousands of voting districts that all in some ways are more or less autonomous from others, and figure out how do we approach them and design security for them when they're small and some large.
Right. I mean, I feel like that's a huge challenge, though. It's just like so spread out, so many different, things that you have to deal with there. So, yeah. Yeah.
But the nice thing is we're now having these conversations. A lot of good work has been done over the last couple of years. A lot, like when you look at organizations like NASED and the National Association of Secretaries of States and the Election Infrastructure ISACs and the designation of elections as critical infrastructure, all that's happened since 2016. So while we are right to continue to have these discussions and to continue to highlight places where more investment is necessary, I don't want to avoid the opportunity to say, hey, these good things have happened. These conversations are happening and they're important.
Great. Well, hopefully they continue, and I'm sure that they will at DEF CON's different tracks that they have going on about that. So.
Yep. So not a time to panic, but a time to continue to be vigilant.
Right, for sure. Well, Matt, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.